So we are time, but we are also not time. And this is a delicate sort of proposition. Right? Time and no time, the time of no time. We are, let's say, individuals, and yet we are the solar system at the same time. And that's another proposition, right? What does it mean? It's like a lot of space in between. You are yourself, and then you are the solar system. Okay. And so the questions that have been posed to me about astrology is, can it help? Of course, knowledge does help, up to a point. So anything we can call knowledgeable and worthy of knowing about can be helpful and useful, depending on what that exactly is. So, now, everyone is their sign, but then everyone at the same time is their opposite sign. You can't be one sign and not be your opposite. So, to extend that further, then you can be your one sign, sun sign, then you have to be the earth sign, because the earth sign is connected to the sun sign. Without the sun sign, you don't have earth sign. Without the earth sign, you don't have sun sign. So, and then you have the squares to that, right, which then constitutes the cross you're on. Okay, the cross you're on, right? A fixed cross, cardinal cross, right? Something like that, right? So you are the cross already, but that's already too much information for people at the beginning. Because then it brings in its rulers. What are the forces involved in that? And then you start understanding why it is a science, right? Right, and a discipline. And that you have to have a unique kind of intelligence, more than just material scientific interest and ability. You have to have a certain psychological intelligence that this is about. Okay? It's not simple. It's not common. It's an uncommon ability. So you've had kings and queens and emperors and empresses who had to have their astrologers, and what that means is that they had to have those individuals who are in tune with what it was enough to give them sound advice and help them with their own karma and so on and so forth. Yeah. So, so it is useful. It's a useful study because you're studying yourself, right? You're studying yourself and how whatever it's called astrologic, right, sort of plays into shaping or defining that for you. Because you are who you are, and you're born with tendencies and programs, and sometimes the astrologic perspective helps to make sense of your tendencies and programs, and sometimes it may not make sense. Comment.
So would you say that someone looking into astrology has to have a certain intuition, or they need to,
Could be an intuition.
Yeah.
Could be an interest, a skepticism that is fundamental. So I'm curious about it. I'd like to know if it's valid or not for me. Well, everybody's in time, so that's valid already. That's the bottom line. You're subject to time fields, right? You're on the clock. Your heart is ticking. You got days to deal with. You got weeks. You got months. You got years to deal with. You've already done your time so far, and you're still in the process of living in your time field. So it becomes, what is it that you really need to know about time? And you see that is the solar system. That is the solar system, right? It is. Your life is the solar system. You're not separate from it. So there's some reality checks there that everybody has to see before they start condemning something that is like idiotic to condemn. We are the solar system. Just yourself. Right? So we are that. We don't want to figure out where we fit in terms of our own patterns, and what seems to be, if there is such a perception of being obstructed. See, where a person is they're around a bad luck or something. There can be something to say about that relative to the astro sort of science. Because it was my shock to find out that I had certain aspects that were perfectly describing the patterns of mishaps I was experiencing as a child. I mean, frighteningly accurate. How could that be? No, and I was disturbed by it. Very much disturbed to find out that the times that I had accidents were exactly aspected by certain configurations and repeatedly. I said, at the clock? So there is a time then, as the Bible says, for this, that, whatever, everything else under the sun and beyond the sun. There's a time now. Where does the individual fit in with what the precision of that time is? It's self-realization practice. You have to determine where you are relative to your own time, what your own, let's say, perceived time is in terms of what you're here to do on Earth, and whether that is a function that you're ready to assume or a mission that you're ready to assume, because I come from spiritualist roots, and it's all about, this life as a stepping up, progression. And the yogis have the same, I guess you might say, value of it. What are you going to learn this time that you couldn't learn before? That, this is going to make a big difference in your ultimate evolution through the universe, so, of time and space, or universes as such. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In terms of, say, Western civilizational practice of astrologic knowledge, its focus is personality, and that's one of the problems I have with it. Something about personality. You the person, not you the cosmos, but you the person. Your personality. So it's a limited view. It's a small view. It's a beginner's view, basically. So rather than limiting you to the sun sign and personality type or ascendant personality type, well, we have to start seeing and feeling ourselves as being the solar system. So you start somewhere, you start with your basic data, but you're really using that to assess where you are in the solar system. So you start seeing the solar system as a field that you are in, so you are that field. It's something you have to believe about it, so you need to know this. And we are, traveling right now on the planet that is subject to all these forces and influences. Right? Its very existence is dependent or contingent upon the influence of the rest of the system. And the staggering level of, let's say, physics dealing with all of this is, I guess maybe even too much for certain astrophysicists to deal with. Or why, this whole thing is working the way it works. It's mind-boggling to some people. Nevertheless, the ancients have said that you have to see yourself in the stars. So even the ancient natives and elders of various traditions realize the correspondence between what's happening on Earth and what is going on up there. As they say, as above, so below. And all axiom. Right? So where do we fit into that? That's really the important thing. Where do we begin or end relative to what time is about in this case? Right? Mm-hmm. 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 Come in.
So it seems like one of astrology's greatest gifts to people as beginners becomes one of astrology's most terrifying traps as people kind of open themselves.
Well, it's not
to
astrology. What we were talking about really then is time. This is all about time. It's not about astrology. Astrology is like a layer on top of the fact of time, because it kind of like romanticizes time in terms of the signs and the houses and all these wonderful, mysterious and glamorous sort of possibilities and considerations, but it's really about our imprisonment in time, period. See, that's the mishap already. See, that's the curse, that's the tragedy already, that we are slaves, right? And this is my premise for doing what I've do and call time mastery, because given time, you're a slave to it. You're born into slavery. It's not racial, it's interplanetary. See? It's galaxial. It's cosmic. Yeah. So it's already the case. So how do we sort it out? Rather than just bouncing around karma, as inherited by family or socially acquired and by accomplishment. So it becomes an issue. Where do you stand? Is there any light in what the ancients have said about the higher function, or let's say spiritual function, let's say, or the guidance function of astrologic wisdom, if there is such a thing? What? And that's what we are curious about. Where's the wisdom in it? You have to find it yourself. It's not going to just come out to you as wisdom. You have to see it. It's what we are living moment to moment, right? And then seeing it from a more objective viewpoint, you start to see, well, there are patterns. And what you're doing moment to moment could be part of a greater, let's say, pattern, larger pattern of time, and say, well, you've been doing this for so many years now. When do you get off it? When does it stop? Is there any clockwork to determine when that could be possible? See? And then you look into the astrologic knowledge or data, and you might see that. You might see beginnings and endings cut out, chiseled out precisely, if you have the heart to look for it. And you're not imagining it. And I didn't want to know what I found out when I looked in there, and I said, no way, Jose. And I'm here to talk about it. So I don't have anything else in the moment to say, but yeah, this is a good beginning. Hugh. Now, the patterns that I am referring to were catastrophic patterns of mishaps that I was having that were happening around the second week of June every year. And the more I was open to seeing that, not believing anything, but seeing it and understanding that this was clockwork. Now, of course, this is my feeble mind. I mean, other people might see it differently. This is clockwork. And I say, well, I'm looking at the history of mishaps that I've had since birth, beginning from 6 months, right, to when I was pushed through the window at 5 years of age. Boom. All of these accidents happening around this time. Wow. Spooky. Right. Maybe it's nonsense, but there it was. And my point is that the more I became conscious of that, the less that pattern had influence on me. So as I saw the danger points, I said, well, let me avoid the second week. Let me avoid going out on journeys and traveling during the second week. It's not about paranoia. It's science. Right? It's experiment. It's consideration. Maybe, maybe not. And then that time became less significant as I became more conscious, which is an important point here. This is practice. So you become conscious of the time, you become conscious of the karmic pattern, and you can start to defeat it, in a manner of speaking. I'm still in time. I still have other times. I still have other, I guess, minor mishaps here and there, because one thing or other. And so that had become managed now to a higher degree than I ever imagined. See? And so there's something to say about being conscious of something, to undo it as much as to indulge it. Mm-hmm. Let's go to origin. You have a birth time because you're born. You're born of parentage. And so you have a birth line. You have a timeline. And that timeline is karma. Your ancestral line is karma. It's not just a little time thing. It's karma. It's massive. Karma. You inherit and you are extending from that. And spiritualities about mastering such karma, but what are you going to master if you don't even know it in its form? You don't know, you don't see the behaviors that you are extending from grandpa and great-grandpa or great-great-grandpa. See, unless you have a history line there. See? And you start to see the pattern that you're being them, unconsciously, mechanically, over time. The idea is that what you need to be and want to be now that you're aware of what you're really being, thinking it was you all the time and it's not you, it's great-great-grandpa. When you're out of, let's say, self-limitation and self-meditation, you might be able to see more into your karmic field. You might be able to see into the past. Right? Why you are who you are today or in this life. You might be able to see more clearly what that is. And so astrology gives you an interesting perspective. Again, I'm not speaking for astrologers. I'm speaking from my own experience. You have a birth time. And most of the people I know who are born and have birth times, precise birth times, haven't fulfilled the promise of that time yet. Many have not fulfilled the potent, let's say, potential of their own birth time. And it's there. When you become an astrologer, you see it for yourself. You see what you have been able to do, and then you can understand, maybe in some cases, why, because you can see when, if you have the time. And you see what was where, when, accordingly, and make sense of it. So if you can see what it was, where, and when, right, you might be able to have some predictability. And that's what this is about, right? And that's what the Hindu yogis do with it. They make profound predictions. They have a system that they've developed over the ages to be able to do that. And predictive astrology is one of their, let's say, their genius to a certain degree.
So you mentioned 3 different brackets of people relative to their sensitivity to time, being below responsiveness to time.
Right, and that's because of either emotional issues, physical handicaps, or mental issues. You can be beneath the promise, let's say, of your birth time, whereas next person born in the same time who doesn't have these, let's say, blood issues and disabilities, emotional issues, problems, right? Psycho issues, if you will, can fulfill that time. And that's the same with people who could be considered twins, born at precisely the same time. One excels, the other one doesn't. One says yes, the other one says no. The times are almost exactly, but we're talking about, what, choice maybe.
Yeah, and then there are people who are right on time, and there are people who are beyond
time. Right, they are the overachievers.
And so how do those 3 things relate to what you said about fulfilling one's potential relative to time?
The potential, you have to understand what your potential is. You have to know what you're interested in doing and what your birth or your karma or your education or your family determines for you as your foundation, right? Family is the foundation for most people. And most people don't go beyond that. Some people can. Some people can go way beyond that. See, so it's really a matter of the individual extending it. See? Some people are born into engineer families, right? And they become engineers. See? And that's like their bottom line, like musicians, right? Born into music, and then that's the bottom line. So you reach that level, but then it depends on whether or not you need to go beyond that level, depending on what you feel you need as an individual, or I like to say in my case, what I was given. What I was given beyond that to assume I could do for its own purpose, and then go beyond that which is what I've been doing from the beginning, going beyond what I've gone beyond. Yeah. So you have to go beyond what you've gone beyond, right? And then relative to astrology, you got to take what that is and understand what it means. We're talking about a 10th house configuration. Then you want to subject yourself to social and professional status to find out if there is, for you, an opportunity to reap the rewards of that karma, right? Which is like public status, right? And then the opposite, which is 4th house, introversion, extroversion, introversion, public work, and then private work. Yeah. And so that's a structure. Some people have a lot of planets in the 4th house of introversion and don't have much in terms of public, but yet for some reason or other they have to do public work, but they feel more comfortable, right? And more private work. So they don't feel comfortable in public. I feel too comfortable in the public. Right? But I also feel very, let's say, inclined to be behind the scenes with people to make sure they have a better shot at accomplishing their own purposes. So, which is kind of like a medical, as I said, more spiritual medical service for people.
How does the book you just wrote on astrology, like what is it? What is it relative to astrology books? What is it relative to your spiritual writings so far?
Well, not really relative to my writing so far. It was really what I didn't really have writings at the time. Going back to April of 1985 when I got to Schenectady, where I was beginning my, I guess you might say my time as a certain type of guru or master. And I was in a really good position to start sharing what I understood. And I had a disposition of a willingness to share that. And it wasn't really in public, although we made it available to a few people. But I was willing to do that because before that time I was playing with Pharaoh Sanders. I was very public and playing here, there, and wherever I could play at that point. So I was a musician then. And then I became more the healer in accord with the karmas of my family, which is what my family was encouraging me to do anyway. So there was family influence. They said, please, they need to hear your wisdom. And I said, nobody needs to hear my wisdom. You need to hear me play. I want to play. That's my wisdom. I want to jam and create music. But that wasn't to be sustained. Didn't take long for me to see I did have I think you might say, an angle to share with people that was unique to my person. Right, and my love for healing. So it's really about that. So we started to teach the topic. I wanted astrology to be the first step. Yeah, not any ultimate anything. It was a baby step on the path to see that we are in time and we want to start our spiritual path by managing that and reflecting upon it and seeing that we have a little bit of control over that. You don't have to be suffering certain karmas once you recognize what those karmas are. Right? So for instance, for people who have a pregnant 7th house, and they see that all they're about is everybody else. It's only everybody else who's their main focus is everybody else. So that's imbalance. That's a preponderance of influence in terms of others and not self. And that has to be balanced to some degree. Some people who see that that's what they suffer pull back and they say, oh, I need to take care of myself. That's good. Right? Because they thought they were taking care of themselves by taking care of everybody else, which is often the downfall of parents. Right? You got to know when to give the kids, and you got to know when you got to take for yourself too. So you balance out your potential and their potential all at once. Yeah. So we have to understand that we are multiple levels of intelligence and consciousness. So nothing is simply what it appears to be. See? So we have to talk then at what level do we know something, have a better understanding what it is, because we're talking about intelligence, which is a mysterious, I guess you might say, factor, and who knows what. See? You can have something as simple as astrology and then, be working from the basics of it at a genius level. see, and really change and transform people, because what you say with these little basic sort of, let's say, factors, or what would appear to be symbolic language. See? And so that's what we need to see, is what kind of resolution the intelligence brings out, not just through astrology or astronomy or science, but through music, art, and human contact as well, and being personal, being related to people, being connected to people. This is part of it. See? So it's not just one thing or anything else. It depends on what depth you bring to people. And not so much the thing, but who's bringing what depth to who at that point. And then, of course, the thing is second to that, actually, because the thing here is enlightenment. See? And sharing the wisdom with other peeps, but not everybody's ready for it. So, you have to wait till you find a person who's ready to hear what you have to say at the level that you feel you functional at. Whether that's Dharma, or whether it's wisdom, or whether it's in some form or other, it's some kind of science, or technology, whatever it is. Right? Mm-hmm.
So it seems like a sufficiently wise being could offer anything to the people at that high level of wisdom, and it would be profound, be it cooking or
doesn't matter.
Music or enlightenment
right.
astrology.
So we're talking about intelligence then.
Yeah.
The whole issue with astrology specifically is a part of a search to try and figure out, when I was young, why the sequence of accidents was happening at the same time. Right. There are other coincidences related to what I'm saying, but we don't have to note them at this point. So what is the mystery? The time. See, so I was being banged pretty heavily, shedding blood at a certain sort of consistent time every year, and that dawned on me as unusual, peculiar. Right? Which is like, okay, well, time. What has time got to do with it? That's astrology. It's all about the time that has to do with anything. See? And so it depends on how you use it. But as I said, the result of my research enabled me to disempower that particular mishap from occurring. Right? I can't explain it beyond the point, but because I looked at the mishap, period, or the cycle, or whatever it was, or maybe I was imagining it, then I didn't have mishaps. See, because there was a period when I was apprehensive about going out at that time, and I think that's consciousness, not fear. So just observing what was happening, I said, okay, all right. So after a couple of cycles of that, then I started doing what I used to do, and I was getting away with it. See, so I had neutralized it. So each individual has to work with their time patterns as individuals. Mm-hmm. So you want to know what that time pattern is. And if you can't determine what that is in your own case any other way, then you do it by astrology, because it's an ancient system, right, that we inherited from the aliens, right? And there's no question about that. This is higher intelligence that has to do with the solar system. Seeing it and working with it, because there's a bigger view. That we are the solar system. If we are the solar system, we are the galaxy. If we're the galaxy, we're the universe. That's going in the right direction. That's native wisdom. So it's not like, oh, we're just these things here in the stars, and they're huge, and they're far away, and so there can't be any influence right now. Nonsense. You are the influence. You need to know it. Come in.
So, personally, I'm working on the question: do I need to really dive into this?
Depends on what you need to know, see, and what you need to engage. See, I got into it to help other people. See, so I had a certain kind of bodhisattvic approach to it. But that's how I was raised. I was raised to be mindful of the healing of other people. See, I was raised not just as a Christian, but as a spiritualist. We gain our progression and we gain our knowledge to help other people, to share it with others, because Not everyone is called to do the same kind of thing. And you might make a difference depending on what you know in the case of other people. So we learn knowledge, whether it's medical knowledge, scientific knowledge, not just to indulge ourselves egoically, but we're hoping that we can be of use to other people. There's the beauty of it. Is in the sharing. That's the beauty of it. See? And so that's why I was able to do it. And I was surprised. I was shocked at how many people I was in. I was, reading for 17 people a day, 10 people a day, and it's a lot of people coming through of all walks of life, I'm making a little coin too, donations, but it's really about sharing the knowledge and giving them some answers that cannot come any other way. I hate to say, right? It's its own universe. So, you have a lot of scientists that are into it. They can be closet astrologers or whatever. I remember in other spiritual organizations I was in, it seemed like every other person was an astrologer, but they wouldn't admit it. They all knew what was going on, but they wouldn't talk about it. But this kind of taboo about being an astrologer is nonsense. Right? It's nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. We're here. We're scientists. We're here to view. We're here to learn, to know, and to share what we find to be so. That's good spirits. Mm-hmm.